Welcome to The Marketing Behind Rapid Growth, the podcast where we explore the strategies, decisions, and growth engines behind some of the world's most successful technology companies. Today we're talking about Wise. Picture this. It's 2011. A man in London opens his banking app and feels a familiar sting. He's paid in pounds, but back home in Estonia he owes a mortgage in euros. Every month his bank quietly takes a cut to make that conversion happen. Not a huge cut. Just enough that he'd almost stop noticing it. Almost. His friend has the opposite problem. He earns euros, he lives in London, he needs pounds, and his bank takes a cut too. Two friends. Two currencies. Two banks, each skimming a little off the top in opposite directions. And then one of them has an idea so simple it barely feels like a business idea at all. What if we just swap? I'll put my pounds into your UK account. You put the euro equivalent into my Estonian account. No wire, no border crossing, no bank fee. Just two friends and a spreadsheet, using the real exchange rate. The one you see on Google, not the one your bank quietly marks up. That kitchen table trick between Kristo Kärman and Taavet Hinrikus became TransferWise. Today we know it as Wise. It trades on the London Stock Exchange. It's worth around $10 billion. It serves more than 18 million active customers. But here's what makes this story worth telling. Wise didn't just build a cheaper way to move money. It built a company where the product and the marketing became the same thing. That's what we're unpacking today. Let's start with the system Wise walked into. For decades, moving money across borders ran on something called SWIFT. Most people assume SWIFT is like a bank transfer highway. It isn't. It's a messaging network, a way for banks to talk to each other, not a way for money to actually move directly. So when your bank doesn't have a direct relationship with the recipient's bank, your money doesn't take a straight path. It hops. Through one intermediary bank, then maybe another, each one taking a small toll, each one adding delay and risk. And here's the part that made this such fertile ground for a challenger. Banks weren't just charging visible fees. Much of their profit was hidden inside the exchange rate itself. You'd send money, get a rate that looked reasonable, and never know exactly how much was quietly skimmed off the top. The opacity wasn't a side effect. It was the business model. This set up a fascinating strategic trap for the banks. There's a concept in competitive strategy called counter-positioning. It describes a situation where a challenger builds something so fundamentally different that the incumbent literally cannot copy it, because copying it would destroy their own profits. That's exactly where the big banks found themselves. There's a leaked memo from Santander, reported from 2017, that reportedly concluded matching Wise's pricing would wipe out 84% of the bank's money transfer profits. 84%. Imagine being a bank executive reading that memo. You know the honest price. You know your competitor is charging it. And you know you can't follow, because your entire profit center depends on not following. That's the trap incumbents built for themselves. And Wise walked right through the door they couldn't close. Now, a peer-to-peer swap between two friends is a nice story, but it doesn't scale by itself. Currency corridors aren't balanced. Far more money flows into some countries than flows back out. You can't just keep matching people manually forever. So Wise had to make a strategic pivot. From a clever trick into actual financial infrastructure. That meant building local liquidity in market after market. It meant securing dozens of regulatory licenses, one painstaking approval at a time. It meant plugging directly into national payment systems. The UK's Faster Payments Network, Europe's SEPA system. This is not glamorous work. This is the unglamorous, expensive, slow work of becoming plumbing. But it paid off. By owning the rails instead of renting them through correspondent banks, Wise turned transfers that used to take days into transfers that clear in seconds. And once that infrastructure existed, the opportunity kept widening. Multi-currency accounts let freelancers and frequent travelers hold dozens of currencies at once, with local bank details in multiple countries. Business accounts opened up international payroll and invoicing. And then came something particularly clever, Wise Platform, a white label version of its own rails that other companies could embed inside their own apps. Think about what that means strategically. Some of Wise's competitors, neobanks, even traditional banks, became Wise's customers. Software platforms like Xero plugged in too. Wise stopped being just a company you visit. It became infrastructure, sitting quietly underneath other companies' products. That's the product side of the story, but a better product doesn't sell itself automatically, especially not when you're asking people to trust a website built by two guys from Estonia with their actual saving. So let's talk about the marketing. Because this is where Wise did something genuinely unusual. The first move was turning transparency itself into a cause. Wise didn't run ads saying, "We have better rates." It ran a campaign to educate people on exactly how their bank was quietly overcharging them. And it did this in the most attention-grabbing way possible. For a campaign called Nothing to Hide, dozens of demonstrators stripped down to their underwear and marched through the city of London, and later through New York's financial district, with the slogan painted directly onto their bodies. There was a mock funeral. There was a rubber duck bath time stunt outside a London tube station. These weren't random gimmicks. Every stunt existed to dramatize one idea. Hidden fees are the joke, and the banks are the punchline. Wise called out high street banks by name. It contrasted the legacy way against the wise way. It pointed to press coverage from outlets like the BBC to back up its claims. It surfaced real Trustpilot reviews across its site. Transparency wasn't a feature buried in the fine print. It was the entire brand identity. The second move was quieter, but arguably even more powerful. Wise treated search engine optimization not as a marketing afterthought, but as a product itself. Here's what that looked like in practice. Someone searches, convert $196 to euros. Most companies would never build a page for that impossibly specific query. Wise did. Live exchange rates, a direct fee comparison against traditional banks, a calculator already filled in with the numbers you searched for. Multiply that by currency converters, Swift code directories, invoice generators. Wise turned free, genuinely useful tools into hundreds of thousands of individual landing pages. Each one captured someone at the exact moment they were making a decision. The result was organic traffic climbing into the millions of monthly visits, essentially for free. And Wise didn't stop at owning searches for its own name. It built comparison pages too. Revolut versus Wise, PayPal versus Wise, populated with live data. Instead of letting some affiliate site control that narrative, Wise controlled it on its own terms with real numbers. The third move was about who delivered the message. Rather than chasing celebrity endorsements, Wise went into the communities that felt this pain most acutely. Digital nomads, travel creators, specific diaspora communities, Indian workers living in the US, Nigerians living in the UK, people who move money internationally, not occasionally, but constantly as a fact of life. By earning trust inside those tight, high-context networks, Wise built something advertising money struggles to buy: authentic word of mouth. Today, roughly 70% of Wise's new customers come through referrals and word of mouth rather than paid acquisition. So what do we take from all of this? The first lesson is that shared scale economies can themselves become a marketing weapon. There's a philosophy associated with companies like Amazon and Costco. As you grow more efficient, you pass those savings back to customers instead of pocketing them as extra margin. Wise does exactly this. It has guided its own pre-tax margins down toward the mid-teens, deliberately, reinvesting the difference into lower prices. Lower prices bring in more customers. More customers create more volume. More volume lowers costs further. And the cycle repeats. In this model, the pricing strategy is the marketing strategy. The second lesson is that marketing can be productized. Wise's programmatic pages weren't banner ads or blog posts. They were small, functional applications, live comparisons, working calculators, offered without asking anyone to sign up first. The product proved its own value before a single form was filled out. The third lesson is that counter-positioning can become identity. Because the banks literally could not match Wise's transparency without exposing their own hidden fees, Wise didn't just exploit that gap quietly. It leaned into it publicly, turned fairness into a cause, and built a customer base that champions the brand rather than merely uses it. Of course, none of this means the story is finished or that the model is free of tension. As a public company, Wise now faces real competitive pressure from players like Revolut and Remitly. Regulatory scrutiny is only intensified as it's grown. And there's a genuine question hanging over any public company that deliberately keeps its margins thinner than they could be. Investors don't always love that trade-off, even when the long-term logic is sound. But step back. and the underlying design is hard to argue with. Wise built a company where the product markets itself, where the marketing actually delivers product value instead of just describing it, and where the incumbents it disrupted are left defending a profitable but increasingly exposed status quo. It started with two friends in a Skype chat, annoyed about a fee they didn't think they should have to pay. It's worth remembering that the biggest companies don't always start with a grand vision. Sometimes they start with someone simply asking, "Why is this so unnecessarily broken?" and then refusing to accept the standard answer. This was the marketing behind rapid growth. See you in the next episode.